to order the January 4th, 2022 meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Before I read our agenda statement, let me just make sure we have everybody. Jean, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Jean, you are live in Town Hall, and John Simons is there as well?
Yes, he is. So if you want me to take a roll call attendance, Aton, I can do that.
Okay, why don't you do that? And we can see John. Great.
Okay, so John Simons,
Here.
Aton Goldberg,
I'm here remotely.
Alyssa Koenig,
Here remotely.
Kelly Cormier,
Here.
and Peter Boynton.
Here. Thank you.
Peter, that was pretty faint, just so you know. We could hear you.
Is this any better, Aton?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, here.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to read the statement pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This meeting of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with the right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, in-person attendance of members of the public and board members will be permitted. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting live may do so on their television by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 26 or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we aren't able to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. If the public would like to participate in public hearings but not attend the meeting in person, please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting to Jean Enright at jenright@northandoverma.gov. Question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. And we're not going to have in-person attendance today based on the current surge of COVID cases. Okay.
So Aton, if I could just
start.
add, in the room,
Yes.
we do have one resident, and we have the property owner for both 212 Brentwood Circle and 33 Appledore Lane. So that's who's in the room tonight.
Okay. Okay. All right. Let's start with lot release 485 Wood Lane.
Okay, so this was a one-lot definitive subdivision approval, which divided 485 Wood Lane to create a new lot known as 17 Great Oak Street. The roadway and single-family home have been constructed, and the site is stabilized. All required easement and maintenance documents have been provided. The developer would like the Form J approved in order for the lots to be released from the covenant. The packet includes the recorded deed, decision, plans, engineer certification letter, Form J signed and stamped by the land surveyor, and pictures of the site. I have displayed on the screen pictures of the site. This picture is taken from Wood Lane, which shows the constructed roadway, as well as the stormwater management feature of a stone trench along the side of the driveway that connects to a catch basin. This is a little bit closer, showing that the lot is stabilized, the lawn is in place, the landscaping is in place, and the house is fully constructed.
So there's no other work that needs to be done?
No, it's
Okay.
on the market. I think it's actually been sold to date, but I've reached out to the developer who's on the line tonight, Joe Lannon, to inform him that he has to release it from the covenant, and prior to a CO, he has to provide a as-built plan to be reviewed by both myself and the town engineer. So this is just for the Form A release, the Form J release, and everything's in order for the release.
Okay.
So, all right, I make a motion to release the lot from the covenant.
Okay. Motion made to release lot from the covenant 485 Wood Lane. Motion made by Mr. Simons. Can we get a second, please?
Second the motion.
So just
Okay.
to clarify, it's lot 72B, shown on the subdivision plan.
Yes.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. All right. All in favor. Let's. John.
Aye.
Alyssa.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Peter.
Aye.
And I vote yes. Great. That's approved. Continued public hearing, 33 Appledore Lane, Sean and Lauren Delaney, application for a watershed special permit under Article 4, Part 5, Section 195, 4.19B, and Article 10, Section 195, 10.7 of the zoning bylaw to authorize an additional 12 by 24-foot garage bay at second floor addition over garage and breezeway and expand paved driveway to access new garage bay. Property is located in the R3 zoning district.
Just as a reminder, all work is proposed within the 325-foot non-discharge buffer zone to a wetland located approximately 130 feet from the lot. The proposed stormwater management includes a system of 2 subsurface dry wells, which are designed to capture the drainage from the proposed additional impervious surface. Department review comments have been received by the Fire Department, Building, and Conservation, and all comments have been addressed. Overall, the plan was revised to collect stormwater runoff from all new impervious areas by relocating the trench drain to lower the elevation on the driveway expansion, and the dry well sizing was increased to account for the additional impervious area. A revised long-term stormwater O&M plan has been signed by the owner. The limit of work line matches the erosion control barrier limit. A note has been added to the erosion control detail to match the written description of the upkeep requirements. A construction detail has been added to the plan to provide the contractor guidance for installation. A soil stockpile area is now shown on the plan. The town's peer reviewer has reviewed all revisions and the project engineer's response comments, and her review has been satisfied. A draft decision is included in your packet for your consideration. And the project engineer, Jack Sullivan, is on the call if you have any questions.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members?
This hearing has been continued a couple times just to finalize the stormwater review, which was finalized over the last week or so.
And it seems like some improvements were made based on all of these discussions, so that's good. All right, can we get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Simons to close the public hearing as to 33 Appledore Lane.
Second.
Seconded by Peter. Okay. All in favor, John,
Yes.
Alyssa,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
Kelly?
Yes.
I vote yes. That is closed, so now we'll review the draft decision.
Aton, I will note that Alyssa did miss the last meeting. However, she has signed a missed meeting form that will be filed
Thank-
with the clerk's office in the morning.
Thank you. Did we discuss this at the last meeting, though? We didn't, right?
We did discuss just simply that it's going to get continued to the
It's
next
continued,
hearing
right.
because stormwater was ongoing.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve the watershed special permit for 33 Appledore Lane?
Motion to approve the special permit for 33 Appledore Lane.
Okay, motion made. Can we get a second, please?
Second?
Seconded. by
Aton,
Mr. Burnett.
Aton, again,
Yes.
while it's open for comment, I will strike as amended on the first page, as there are no amendments made.
Okay. So the amendment is that it's not amended? So as, no, going into a time loop there. Okay.
I'll consider this one a win. I didn't get amendment.
So motion made in second. All in favor, Mr. Simons,
Aye.
Alyssa,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
Kelly?
Yes.
I vote yes. That's approved. Okay.
I'm sorry.
212.
Who seconded that? Johnson. Motion.
Motion made by Kelly.
Second was Kelly, and motion to approve was John, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. 212 Brentwood Circle, John and Michelle Ternello, application for the watershed special permit Under Article 4, Part 5, Section 195-419B, and Article 10, Section 195-10.7 of the zoning bylaw, to authorize installation of an in-ground pool, patio, shed, and fencing within the non-discharge zone of the Watershed Protection District. Property is located in the R1 zoning district.
Okay, again, as a reminder, this is a 1-acre site. The development is located fully within the 325-foot non-discharge buffer zone from a wetland area located at the adjacent 96 Brentwood Circle. The proposed stormwater management includes 2-foot deep river rock drainage trenches surrounding the proposed impervious site improvements. A total of 1,352 square feet of additional impervious area is proposed on the site. An operations and maintenance plan has been provided, and the proposal includes a cartridge-style filter system. Pool drawdown has been detailed on the plan. The water is pumped from the pool and shall be discharged to the river rock drainage trench to promote discharge. The owner has shown the erosion control to be established in the work area and construction access points. The erosion control detail has been revised to show the wood post on the side of the barrier opposite the water flow. A construction detail has been added to the plan to provide the contractor guidance for installation. Limit of work disturbance line has been revised to encompass all proposed work areas. A proposed soil stockpile has been shown. Lastly, a tree protection detail has been added to the plan and a note in the area of the proposed shed that tree protection shall be provided if any work is close to a mature tree. The town's peer reviewer has reviewed all revisions and the project engineer's response comments, and her review has been satisfied. Again, a draft decision is included in your packet for your consideration.
Okay. Any questions or comments from board members?
Gene, just a question related to the proper types of pool and the maintenance of the pool. I know back a number of years we got into a tizzy every time we got a pool, but what's they consider to be the best practice on the type of pool and the type of maintenance plan on a pool in the watershed these days?
I can bring up the O&M plan, but essentially the drawdown, you stop putting chemicals in the pool prior to the drawdown for the winter, and the drawdown is directed to the stone trench around the pool in order to infiltrate. The river rock has a repair plan and maintenance plan, so storage of chemicals is also on it.
The other question I have related to that is, I know Peter has talked a lot about in the watershed, where is the runoff, where are the problems and so forth. Have we gotten any information yet? And it particularly relates to, do we think there's any problem in the watershed because of pools?
Not specific to pools by any means, but there certainly was shown in the testing associated with the watershed update plan that there's certain brooks or streams, one of which is near the country club area, that had higher rates in the testing data.
Okay.
Not known cause,
But there was nothing ever related to pools?
Not specific to
Do we
pools.
even know how many pools are in the watershed or
I
in
don't.
town in general?
Yeah,
No.
I don't,
Okay.
no.
It's not a big deal, but I just feel like, whatever, we should it looks like we have a standard formula for how we do pools,
Yeah.
which I think is the right way to do it.
We've
So,
we've
yeah.
certainly gotten better in the last
Yeah.
4 years or so with the O&M plan and very specific drawdown responsibilities.
Yeah,
I would say if this was within 100 feet, it would have to go to the zoning board of appeals for a new structure within the non-disturbance zone. This is within 325, so it
Yeah.
didn't meet that hurdle, where other pools have met that hurdle.
Yeah.
They've had to go to ZBA as well as planning.
yeah, okay.
Dean, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So, to John's point, I've got a pretty bad echo. Does it sound all right to you?
It sounds fine here.
Okay. To John's point, so we have from the watershed plan update and the testing, we know which streams have elevated levels of the substances that they're testing for, such as phosphorus, nitrogen. What I think we don't know is whether or not pool drawdowns and the chemicals typically found in a pool have any effect on exacerbating the runoff of the sort of substances that are a concern to the lake. So let me just give an example of what I mean. You know, does the drawdown of a pool with chlorinated water, does that somehow have the effect of releasing phosphorus or nitrogen that would otherwise be bound where it lies in the watershed? And I'm not saying that there's a connection. What I'm asking is there a way for us to find out if typical pool chemicals have those type of effects on releasing chemicals of concern into the lake as they are drawn down and drained into the water table? That was a question, Jean. And I don't expect that you have the answer, but I mean,
I certainly don't, but the drain down and maintenance plan calls for chlorine levels to be reduced to undetectable levels less than 0.1 milligrams to 1, either by eliminated chlorine usage or for approximately 10 days to allow chlorine levels to dissipate, or by utilizing, I'll say this wrong, but sodium thiosulfate or other pool dechloration chemicals approved by DEP for use in watershed areas.
I see. Well, that's all reassuring, and it would seem to make the chlorine question moot, but I was just using that as an example of a typical pool chemical. So I don't know if there might at some point be an opportunity to ask a consultant who's qualified in this area to ask if there's any literature on the effect of typical pool chemicals of releasing substances of concern into a drinking water supply. It's just an open question.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wondering, the consultant that just did the water study, whether arguably that falls within the scope of what their effort is, because they did a lot of work on that's one of the few things I read actually this time.
It just didn't come up with an area of concern, so
Yeah.
we didn't really push them in that direction to
No, I
weigh
mean,
in on it.
if they're still around, maybe they can answer questions, just give us some idea.
Yep, I'll look into it.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks, John. Thanks, Jean.
Can we get a motion to close the public hearing as to 212 Brentwood Circle, please? Motion made by John,
Second.
seconded by Peter. All in favor, John,
All right,
Alyssa,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
Kelly?
Yes.
I vote yes. Okay, that's closed. Could we get a motion to approve the watershed special permit for 212 Brentwood Circle? Oh, I'm sorry, do we want to, have people read the, I'm sorry, have people, I guess I should say, have people read the proposed draft decision?
Yeah, I have a question for Jean. On the
Okay,
top
go
of
ahead,
page, I'm sorry, on the top of page 3, Jean, where Roman numeral 3 fertilizers limited statement. In prior examples, what I have seen is the fertilizer limits and the treatment to driveway restrictions. It was actually on the one we just previously approved. And is there a reason that this one doesn't have, and I'm sorry, I forget the exact term for the limits on the driveway treatments.
No, there's no reason it's not included, non-coal tar-based pavement.
Right.
I can add that.
Great, thank you.
And just so you know, this is Jack Sullivan. That deed restriction is noted on the site plan, so if we want to order it added to the decision as well, but it is in the upper left-hand corner of the site plan.
Thanks, Jack.
Yep.
And John, kind of to your earlier point, I mean, this is a bit away from it, but this was also commented in the watershed plan update, but one of the actions in that update was that there does seem to be a need to be explicitly advising landscapers working in the watershed of these restrictions, such as the fertilizers and phosphorus free. And during the public outreach, we got comments that were, pretty distressing. People actually walking around talking to landscapers doing work, saying, what type of fertilizers are you using? And do you know there's restrictions here? And they would reply that they had no idea. So the idea from the watershed plan was that we need to find a way to be communicating this to landscapers in addition to putting it in these type of decisions.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Peter.
you
And I'm
think-
sure we probably do know the majority of them, who they are, so, maybe it wouldn't be that hard to send a communication to them.
Right.
And do you think maybe signage around, kind of just maybe on some of the major roads? Because I think it's hard, because if the owners, a lot of times, years go by and they'll know it, but they won't remember to tell their landscapers. The landscapers change, so.
I think it's a great idea, Eitan. Some years ago, we took a look at all of the road crossings going in and out of the watershed boundary around the lake, and if my memory serves, there were 38 or 39 crossings. However, that includes even very small roads, and I think your point was, perhaps the major ones, but there was some discussion as well of, just marking, you are entering the watershed. We have that to say that you're entering the, Mill Historic District. We have those sides, but a lot of towns have you're entering the watershed district signs, and, for example, saying, limited salt treatment on roads, be careful. And, that would be another good item to have. So I do think it's a good idea.
Gina, who would we talk to about that kind of thing? Like, signs that say, entering watershed, limited salt use, fertilizer restrictions, and then a phone number to call or something like that, just to, make sure you're following the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I would talk to the town manager. I would think the Board of Selectmen would have to authorize that type of signage.
Yeah.
And the DPW, I think, would be involved as well.
Okay. Is there someone from our board that might kind of be one to maybe write an email to maybe the chair of the Board of Selectmen, the town managers, just with this idea? Just we have a lot on Gene's plate, so it might be something, a quick email from one of us just to say,
Well,
hey, can you guys look into this?
If it's helpful, Eitan, I'd be happy to draft it, but I really feel that it should come from you as the chair. So
Okay.
I'm happy to draft something and send it to you. And, anyone who wants to edit or comment, I'd certainly welcome it. No pride of authorship, but I do suggest it come from you.
Okay, that sounds like a great plan. Let's do that. Okay.
So rather than people commenting in email on something like that, you might want to bring the draft to a planning board meeting, and you guys can review it and approve it.
Okay.
Good caution. Good catch, Gene. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any other changes to the 212 Brentwood Circle? So can we get a motion to approve the watershed special permit for 212 Brentwood Circle as amended?
So moved.
Motion made by John. Can we get a second, please?
Seconded.
Seconded by Kelly. All in favor. John.
All right,
Alyssa.
Yes.
Peter.
Aye.
Kelly.
Yes.
And I vote yes. John, Jack, thank you for your due diligence in getting these to the finish line. I think they came out better products for the process.
Thank you, board members. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So next we're going to go to planning board discussion May 2022 annual town meeting calendar, because then we're going to talk about some items, the Royal Crest and the Inclusionary that maybe town meeting items. And just to get a sense of our timing, we'll talk about the calendar first.
All right, so in order to line things up so that the recommendation by the planning board will be made ahead of the Board of Selectmen making their warrant recommendations and closing of the warrant, the calendar lines up where the legal notice would go. The legal notice required for the public hearing for zoning amendments would go to the Tribune on January 27th. At that time, all materials should be available to be viewed in both the planning department and the clerk's office. So the first legal ad would print on January 31st, the second on February 7th, and the first public hearing would open on February 15th. Anticipating that 3 public hearings would be maintained as that's been past practice. The second would be March 1st, the third would be March 15th, where a recommendation would be made. The Board of Selectmen would close the warrant on March 28th, and they'd vote on warrant recommendations. And typically, Eitan, you're asked to come before that board and kind of just talk about zoning amendments with them prior to their recommendation.
Okay. And, okay. Does anybody have?
There's
go ahead.
one more planning board meeting, so today is the 4th. So I believe January 18th, there's one more planning board meeting ahead of it, the legal ad going to the Tribune.
Okay. Anyone have questions or comments about that proposed calendar? Okay. Okay, so what should we do next, Jean?
So if we go to the Royal Crest discussion, I know Suzanne is on the line to talk about that draft overlay.
Okay, let's do that.
For the zoning amendment.
Okay. I'm going to try to finish that off, just going through the bylaw.
Yep, so the bylaw sections 8, Articles 8 and 9 are on the agenda for this evening, and that really gets you through the first initial look at the bylaw ahead of public hearings.
Okay.
The only other article is Article 10, which is really just severability, which I didn't include on the agenda because it's standard language.
Okay, let's do that.
Good evening,
Good evening.
board members. So I'm here to sort of walk you through the last 2 sections of the Royal Crest proposed zoning bylaw, which are, as Jean said, Part 8 and Part 9. So the Part 8 essentially deals with the process through which the planning board will review a project plan that's submitted to the board for its review. So if you recall how the process is set up now, the master development plan, which shows the project as proposed, is passed by the town meeting. And then this zoning bylaw sets out the criteria through which the property will be developed. And within that context, a project plan is submitted to the planning board for its review to consider whether or not the project plan is consistent with the master development plan and also with the bylaw, the criteria set out in the bylaw. So section or Part 8 is the application process for that project plan review that is submitted to the planning board. It is very similar to the process that we have already in place, which is the site plan review process. So there's a provision for the pre-application review that is amongst the staff so that it can have that initial review before it goes to the board. Then the elements of the application are included in the bylaw. It's very specific, as we have in our site plan review process, which includes the plans, the map, the traffic, the landscaping, the wetlands and the sides and the roadways. And so all of that information has to be included into what is submitted to the planning board. Also included in that is the phasing plan. And then there is the ability for the planning board to send this out for peer review so that it can be reviewed by a peer review expert, which the developer is obligated to pay for that process. The board then holds a public hearing and reviews the plan to ensure that it is compliant with the master development plan and the zoning bylaw. The decision has to be filed within 90 days of the close of the public hearing. The board reviews that plan. This goes to, I'll refer you back to the bylaw as we go through this. So this is the process part. of it, and it's right before the decision on the application. So the board holds that public hearing, and then and it issues a decision, which is Part 9, Section 39. The board can consider whether or not certain aspects of the guidelines can be waived, and it looks at whether that's going to have a negative impact. It's the same type of waiver considerations that you do currently with your site plan review. And the board, there's 3 actions the board can take. It can approve if it finds that the project review plan is consistent with the bylaw and the master development plan, all of the information required has been submitted, and the process is consistent with what is required. Then the board approves that plan. If there is some consideration that everything has been completed, except there are some conditions from additional permitting boards that need to be complied with, an additional review has to occur, then the board can conditionally approve it. And then lastly, it can also deny a plan if it finds that if it finds that the materials haven't been submitted, it's inconsistent with the master development plan, and essentially those are the reasons that either it's inconsistent with master development plan, it's or the information has not been submitted, then the board has the ability to deny it. So the decision has to be issued within 90 days of the close of the public hearing. There is no appeal of that, as we typically consider a site plan review under the special permit guidelines under the Mass Zoning Act. Any appeal from any decision of the board would be actually from the building inspector, because once the board makes its decision, if it's an approved plan, then it goes to the building inspector for the building inspector to issue building permits. There's an appeal period then. And if there's a denial, then it would go to the building inspector for the building inspector to deny the building permit, and there could be an appeal of that. So it's a different process, a little bit different, but there's still a built-in appeal period and a built-in review of the planning board. There's also section 42, talks about the timing of how long the permit is valid for. It states that within construction of the project must commence within 2 years of the planning board's decision. The next section is 43, and that talks about revisions of any of the development plans. And we've talked about it at other meetings with regard to various parts of the planning board of this zoning bylaw. So there's 3 types of changes that can occur. There's a minor change that gets submitted to the planner, to the planning board to determine if the proposed change to the master development plan is going to be a minor change. And that just deals with building orientation in certain locations. And also the board has to find that there is going to be no material or adverse impact to any of the zoning bylaw, the traffic, stormwater, any of that nature. In that case, the board has the authority to issue an approval of the revision to a plan. Secondly, if the board finds that there is a need for this, there can be a public hearing. That at that point, the board looks at whether or not a revision to the plan there are changes, but they're not significantly significant to the master development plan. And then the public hearing is held on that issue. A decision is filed with the town clerk's office, and the building permit can be obtained. Thirdly, if the board finds that a revision is substantially or materially adverse to the master development plan or inconsistent with the zoning bylaw, then the board directs the developer to go to town meeting to request that any changes be approved through town meeting through a change to the master development plan. And essentially those are the aspects that Part 8 and Part 9 cover. The only last part of it is, as Jean said earlier, is a severability provision. If one part of the bylaw is found to is not upheld, then the rest of the bylaw remains in effect. So I think that we've been through the entire bylaw at this point. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions or comments at this point? Okay. Thank you, Suzanne.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Jean, can you let us know what else we received, and just for people's knowledge, and for public, of what else was in the packet for Royal Crest Trinity today? Not that, I don't think we're going to go through it, but just what was there.
Nope, just I'll make you aware what's there, and you can review it, and we can talk about it at a future meeting if you'd like, but the program summary was just carried. Again, it's the same program summary we've seen for many meetings. In addition to that, there was an inquiry about the parking requirements that we discussed at the last meeting, and there was a request for some comparison to other mixed-use developments that have occurred in the area, as well as what we included on this table is a comparison to the Osgood. And so the draft bylaw that you looked at did have some outdated recommendations for parking, and so the first column is what's currently carried in the draft. The second column is the existing zoning requirements for parking, and then the existing Osgood requirements and the proposed Royal Crest. And so those are kind of the most, the proposed Royal Crest is somewhat aligned with the Osgood, I would suggest. Other than that, Dan Beckley's on the call, and he's done some investigating on other mixed-use developments in Hanover, Linfield. Meadowwalk is really kind of how this whole discussion began, where there was a mixed-use development there that followed through this master plan type of procedure. Suffolk Down, Tuscan Village, Woodmont Commons in Londonderry. And I'll just say, like, each development is unique. It's hard to find an apples-to-apples comparison in terms of whether public transportation is nearby. Certainly the Merrimack College component is different than some of the other developments shown in this table. And then some of the metrics are included at the bottom in terms of how many acres the property is, square feet of development, types of
I think that
mixes.
table at the bottom is very revealing. I don't really say any more than that, but it is interesting when you look at the size and the square footage, how this stacks up against the other ones.
Okay, well, everyone can take a look at that, and if there's more discussion, we can have that at the next meeting if we want to, if there
Yep,
are changes to the bylaws that anyone has.
You certainly want to
suggestions on.
digest it, but in the end, we need to come up with the requirements for the zoning bylaw for parking. And I think this just gives you a good look at other types as well as our Osgood, which was contemplated to be a similar type environment, where parking requirements were identified. So,
I think one thing that would be helpful is if we know, so we'll come up with whatever we think is the appropriate parking requirements, but let's say, again, all this assumes, bylaw approval and project goes forward and all of that, but 3 years into the project and they realize, hey, parking needs to be more. Where would be some places that we could feel comfortable that parking could be added if, that became an issue, or even subtracted if we find that, okay, look, there's always open spaces, maybe something can be changed. Like where would be those places that there might be some flexibility, and I think that would give us a little more comfort on not having to necessarily be as exact with our ratios.
Oh, that's a good point, very good point.
yeah, so in some of our bylaws, we provide for land bank parking with, parking reduction can be given as a special permit where land bank parking has shown on a plan for future development, so that's not uncommon.
Okay.
Okay, so additionally carried in the agenda is some responses to past inquiries, so again, somewhat housekeeping, but I think Kelly at one point asked, where do people go in North Andover, where do they work, what are the commutes like, and I think we'll get to this a little later, where we have a proposal for a scope of work for a town-wide traffic study, but I did want to just point out, in our master plan, we have a table that shows where residents work, and more than 22% of the town's workers are also employed in North Andover. 11.1% travel to Boston, 8.2% to Andover, 6.2% to Lawrence, 3% to Methuen, and 2.5% to Lowell. And so it kind of shows that certainly a number of people are in a surrounding community, and only 11% travel to Boston, which, to be honest, I was somewhat surprised by that. but 22% work within our town itself. So again, it just gives you a sense a little bit about commutes and directions people are traveling. In addition, I think, John, you had asked about adaptive signalization and how that would play out with the Mass DOT's roadway improvement for Route 114. And essentially, I included an email from the project engineer for that project. And in summary, the adaptive signalization would really come in at the end of the whole project. For it all to become one is after the construction of utilities and roadway, and essentially at the end of the project, which could take up until 2027, is when the benefit of all the adaptive signalization comes into play. And lastly, so there was a lot of discussion, I think Peter had brought up in the past, about intersections that don't necessarily intersect within the corridor, but abut the corridor that people travel through. And so I had suggested, I reviewed this with Peter, and it seemed to satisfy what he was looking for. However, again, I'll refer to the townwide study that I think was more what Kelly was leaning towards in previous discussions. And so what I suggested to Peter is potentially a traffic study for these specific intersections that either abut the corridor or cross the corridor, and to isolate these in order to see if there's an impact to commute times throughout these intersections. To do this, I ran it also by our peer reviewer, and the request would be for the proponent's consultant to perform a travel time runs back and forth along these routes during the peak hours while school is in session to establish a baseline condition, and then they can use their model to estimate the increased delay that may be experienced. So he suggests a minimum of 5 travel time runs should be completed for the baseline, and then it would just really give you an understanding of the current conditions and then the post-Royal Crest redevelopment conditions. Again, this is specific more so to the Royal Crest redevelopment proposal, not necessarily the townwide study. And there'd be a lot of overlap, honestly, with this study and the townwide study, but I just wanted to give it to you for consideration. Do you want to entertain this type of analysis? And if so, would you like a peer review analysis of the data?
Okay. Members' thoughts? You want to do something like this? Want to see about the townwide study? Both? What do people think?
Gene, could I go back to the excerpt you got out of the master plan?
Sure.
There's about, if I'm reading it correctly, 38% of all other locations. What are the other locations?
Just any that are not specifically identified here. So not Boston, not Andover, not Lawrence, not Methuen. So.
I guess the reason I'm asking is, so that would include towns that surround Boston that would be part of what we consider to be greater Boston, but,
Yep.
Cambridge, but not Boston literally.
That's my understanding, Peter.
Cambridge is
Okay.
separate here, but anybody else, you worked in Arlington or any of those places?
Somerville, yeah.
But it could also be, Haverhill or Dracut or
Yeah.
Salem, New Hampshire. I mean, it's probably anything that's like under 1 or 2%, where it's each of the towns themselves. I'm not sure if there's another data North versus Boston area ones. Okay, but as to the individual traffic study, is this something that we'd like to recommend? Peter, Kelly, I think you two had to kind of.
Well, my comments were about the crossings.
Yeah.
And as Gene outlined, and I mean, I think it's useful to know unless it's duplicative with another study. And if it's duplicative with another study, then I don't think we need to do it if we'll get that result out of the other study.
Well, let's see what the timing is. Gene, let's say we want to recommend the townwide study. Potentially, what's the timing on that?
Yeah, see, I'm not sure, and that's another agenda item, but essentially there's a scope that I wanted to run by this board to see if that would satisfy kind of the inquiries that have come up, either through just discussions with town residents or amongst these board members. And then if the board was supportive and recommended that study, I'd have to talk to the town manager about, well, first I'd have to get an estimate. I don't have the estimate to do that study, and I have to talk to the town manager about funding for that study. And it's really somewhat independent of the Rural Crest redevelopment, because it's townwide and it's to assess the cumulative effect of the recent development, or proposed development, or permitted but yet not constructed development.
So,
I don't really have a time study. I'd be concerned whether it would be like before town meeting, to be honest.
right, so then I'd say let's look into doing, we'll definitely talk about that as a bigger picture thing that a lot of people have definitely talked about. But why don't we move forward with the intersection study? Because at least we know we can get that done and have that, and that information will be useful. At least we can have that for, the public hearings,
Yeah, I think we just need to be, I understand that the larger traffic study will take more time because it's more comprehensive, and I think will give us kind of some true data, because this gets into, what's people keep saying, we all say, or different, traffic's getting worse. This is making traffic worse. So this is really about where do we, as the people of North Andover, travel on a weekly basis through town, and giving us some true information on what that means when we talk about things getting worse or not worse. So I do think it's important to do, and I think that's probably a key piece of data that'll be missing for people in terms of if they're looking for a fact-based response there. But I understand that it's not something we can likely get done by May.
Okay, so let's try to go forward with both those items, Gene.
Okay. So certainly we'll talk to Trinity and their consultants about going forward with this analysis. And then the other agenda item, which has the scope for a townwide study, you're supportive of the scope. I just want to make sure I'm understanding that.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll talk to, again, the town manager about that and how to proceed.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Anything else for Royal Crest for tonight?
Nope, that's it.
The only other thing I was thinking, Gene, is when we were talking about the meeting calendar,
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll go, eventually the Board of Selectmen have to make a recommendation as well.
Yep.
I did find there was some decent value to the joint meeting that we had. So I'm wondering if one of these public hearings, either one of them or in addition to, might make sense to be a joint, because I think some of the feedback that the public gives in the planning sense is sometimes different than some of the public feedback in the Board of Selectmen sense, and same with the members themselves. They have different constituents coming to them with different kind of questions, and I think all of which would be reasonable to talk about at a town meeting, but it might be helpful to have that kind of a joint thing. I think for the applicant too, to just kind of, if we're really getting to the end and we have a bylaw and we have a, more of a kind of final picture, it might be good to present that together.
Okay.
I think more towards the end of the process. I mean, I think we should do a couple of our, own public hearings, get that process going, get the dialogue going, see what the questions are, things like that. But I think maybe towards the end of that, it might be good to have a joint one.
Yeah, so maybe add between the March 1st and the March 15th public hearings, just a regularly scheduled meeting the Board of Selectmen might have where it could be a joint meeting
Right.
prior to either making a recommendation.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And then, okay, do you want to do the inclusionary zoning bylaw?
So, yep, we can cover that now. So we don't have a revised draft, however, it's not, when we do update it with, as I discussed the last meeting, we had some comments submitted from the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. We haven't incorporated his edits yet, but essentially, I guess the request is to get some type of confirmation from the board that they are supportive of initiating a warrant article at this point. Again, given the town meeting calendar, we're up against noticing this, and so I just wanted a sense of the board whether they're supportive of initiating an article for inclusionary zoning.
Okay. And do you think this will be fully ready and vetted by the time we are able to go through public hearings. I mean, I think it's pretty much there, but I just wanted your confirmation on that, because to me, that's the most important part of initiating it.
Yep, I think we'll have a very clean draft for the January 18th meeting. Attending, the Affordable Housing Trust actually meets that same night ahead of this meeting, and so I will be attending their meeting and presenting it to the trust as a whole as opposed to just the chair. And then I would request the chair also come to the next planning board meeting to just weigh in terms of what the Affordable House Trust feels about the article.
Okay, well, I'm certainly comfortable and inclined to initiate this as a warrant article, and we can again make our recommendation once we've had the public hearings, but it seems like the bylaw is going to be ready to go. We've talked about it for a while. Seems like it should be ready to go as an article. Other members' thoughts, John?
No, I don't have any particular thoughts other than, is there any empirical information about how successful these things have been? I know I asked the person from the state that, and they said there was nothing, but I don't know if anything has shown up since then. So,
I don't think the information you're looking for. It's been known to be a maintenance tool more than getting you to the 40B numbers. It's a good maintenance tool. But some towns have had a lot of success, others have had no success. It's a really wide range.
The anecdotal things that I've heard, John, from different towns is that it's helped, especially when you have a payment in lieu, build affordable housing trusts and things like that, in terms of getting big number changes. Again, I agree with Gene. I think it's more of a maintenance tool, and unless you have really big projects, it's not gonna do much one way or the other. But it's a good way here and there just to keep things up and to just get some housing as well as some donations to the Affordable Housing Trust, which we could always use. That's anecdotally at least what I've heard. Okay, Alyssa?
I mean, I don't have any specific comments on it. I think overall I'm happy with it. I think I've made it known. I think this is something that's a good thing to move forward with.
Okay, great. Peter?
No comments. Thanks, Ethan.
Okay. Kelly?
Nothing additional.
Okay, Gina, so I think we can initiate it and then just continue going through the process.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So why don't we'll go back to new public hearings?
Yep. So, Eitan, you'll have to read the beginning of the agenda again. For that.
Okay. We're going to be doing a new public hearing pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. This public hearing of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted by a remote means in accordance with applicable law. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www. I think I was too many W's. www.northandoverma.gov. For this meeting, in-person attendance, members of the public and board members will be permitted. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting live may do so on their television by tuning to Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 6 or going online at northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time by technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceeding as soon as possible after the meeting. If members of the public would like to participate in the public hearing, please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting to Gene Enright at jenright@northandoverma.gov. The question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. Okay. And this is 1274 Osgood Street, formerly 1210 Osgood Street for Jetta Development. Application for modification to a previously approved site plan review and reduction in parking special permit modification under Article 8 Supplementary Regulations Part 1 Off-Street Parking and Loading, Part 3 Site Plan Review, 195 8.17 Revisions to Approved Site Plans, and Article 10 Administration 195 10.7 of the North Andover Zoning Bylaw. The applicant proposes to revise commercial uses, including replacing a drive-through bank with a drive-through coffee shop. The project is located within the B2 zoning district.
All right, so you may recall the applicant at the November 2nd meeting requested this change to be considered an insubstantial change to the prior approval. The board did not support the request and advised the applicant to apply for a modification to the site plan review and parking reduction special permit approval. The supplemental traffic analysis to review trip projections and operating conditions for proposed changes was submitted to the peer reviewer, and the peer reviewer has responded, so that's in your packet tonight. The analysis provides trip generation information for the site, as well as review of traffic operations during critical weekday morning time period. This analysis has been sent to TEC, as I just stated. Their comments are included. The revised site plan proposes an overall slight decrease in impervious area and no change to the drainage design. Department review comments have been received from Conservation, Police Department, and Fire Department. The Conservation Administrator communicated that as long as the stormwater design does not change and less impervious surface will result in proposed change would not need to go before the Conservation Commission. She has asked for a small tweak to the erosion control line that's shown on the plan, and so that's pending. The Police Department would like to ensure that queuing for the drive-through will be maintained completely on site with no backup onto Route 125, and that there's sufficient parking provided. And the Fire Department has reviewed the revised swept path analysis and has no concerns. So in your packet tonight are the traffic analysis, the revised site plan showing the new building that you reviewed at the last meeting. There was one resident comment received, and there's 2 responses to that resident comment, one from the town's peer reviewer as well as the applicant. So I'm sorry.
I was going to say, could you read the resident comment and the
Sure.
and the responses into the record?
Yep. So the resident comment was received on Thursday, December 30th. Jean, though I currently serve as the chair of the town's master plan implementation committee, I am writing to you as a private citizen to note my concerns regarding the proposed changes relative to the proposed development at 1274 Osgood Street. I reviewed the revised traffic analysis provided for the subject project. Unless I've missed it, there is nothing that addresses the proposed storage lengths provided for the twin drive-through lanes. While the capacity analysis indicated sufficient level of service downstream at the drive-through exit within the site, there is nothing that I see that examines the ability to process vehicles at the order and pickup windows. This is my main concern. Will there be sufficient queuing capacity upstream to handle the proposed trip generation during the proposed weekday morning peak hour? Furthermore, in light of the NAPD's concerns about all queuing remaining on-site, what is the actual functional plan should queues back up beyond the site? Promises and assurances are great, but should this get built and backups occur, there needs to be a concrete plan in writing to address them. Again, I'm neither for or against the proposed site, but as an abutter, I do want to ensure that any potential operational issues are vetted and addressed prior to approval by the town. Thanks, Jonathan Strauss. And so the response to that from TEC, who's the town's peer reviewer of the project. Jean, please use this email response as an attachment regarding queue capacity of the Starbucks. In the absence of available data, TEC typically utilize guidance from a few past studies like Mike Sparks' Drive-Through Queue Generation 2012 and Mark Stuccelli's New Drive-Through Stacking Information for Banks and Coffee Shops 2009. Generally, the compilation studies note that 13 queue spaces are sufficient to satisfy the 85th percentile maximum queue length, SPAC 2012, with a need for 5 queue spaces between the pickup window and the menu board is ideal. Stuccelli, 2009, in terms of coffee shops. These analyses do take into account the presence of the dual menu board, such as the Osgood Street site, and do directly include studies of Starbucks locations as part of the data set. Based on the site plan and the assumed 20-foot front bumper to front bumper spacing within the queue, there is available space for 14 vehicles to stack on site, with 1 at the pickup window, 5 between the pickup window and the menu boards, and 4 in each menu board line. TEC would find that the queue space available would generally be sufficient to cover the typical 85th percentile condition for standard design. For those minimal occasions above 85th percentile, any queue would be on-site and not directly affect Osgood Street. TEC's only concern is that the queue storage for the menu board directly against the building will overlap the crosswalk by about 1 foot, assuming the 20-foot front bumper to bumper. There is space in the front of the menu board available, so if this board moved a couple feet up, this would correct the issue, but this request is in the absence of original reasoning for that positioning water connection location. TEC doesn't necessarily believe that this 1 foot overlap, which may never materialize, is warranting condition to reposition the board at the expense of the water connections that may need to be where designed. And then the response from the applicant's engineer. Jean, below is our response to the resident comment. We expect that the latest double drive-through lane design should accommodate the vehicle queues. The latest site design provides for vehicle storage of at least 14 cars and potentially up to 16 cars, which is greater than most Starbucks designs. In addition, signage will be posted prohibiting the drive-through queue from extending beyond the pedestrian crosswalk by A, a sign indicating "Do not block crosswalk," and by B, a sign indicating the location of the last vehicle in lane. Please park and visit us inside. The bypass lane to the right of the queuing lanes allows customers to easily avoid the drive-through and park instead. This Starbucks store offers a walk-up window to the left of the front doors. Local residents can walk to the Starbucks, order at the window, and receive their order without entering the store. Walk-up windows has been especially useful during pandemic to ensure the safety of the customers and the employees. They also minimize the use of drive-through lane. The Starbucks mobile order app has been used extensively in recent times and will be promoted at this store. The app encourages customers to pre-order, park, and either enter the store or walk up to the walk-up window to get their order. Curbside pickup is also available for customers who pre-order, giving them the option to wait in their parked car to receive their order. Customers that use the app are on-site, typically less than 1 minute. Starbucks is testing handhelds, which allow the store to take orders of customers in line to accelerate transactions. It should be noted that the rest of the site is expected to generate less entering traffic during the weekday morning peak hour, so there will be less entering traffic to conflict with the Starbucks traffic movements. It should also be noted that the Starbucks driveway impacts a secondary internal driveway accessed from the primary internal driveway and does not conflict with the Osgood Street directly. And that's by Robert D. Benedetto from Hancock Associates. So I think we have Robert on the line. If you have questions?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So there's a lot of information in the packet on the traffic analysis, and I think that's really what the board was queuing on in terms of the queue lines as well as the traffic generation.
Okay. Anyone have questions, comments that they want to lead with?
I think this is a good process. I'm glad we had a hearing because I think we got all these things on the table, and I think the applicant's done their due diligence, and I don't think in the end there's going to be a problem. I still think along the lines, Etan, of what you said about the parking, that you never know in advance, maybe we put a condition in there that they have to take appropriate steps to ensure it doesn't back up out of the property, and that maybe after 6 months we just do a quick study just to make sure that's the case.
Those are pretty much my thoughts exactly. So I very much agree with John. I like the information we got. The new traffic information is helpful. The back and forth, the resident comment was very helpful, as was the responses to that. So I like the idea of the signs. I'm not sure that people follow signs or would be willing to listen to them, but I think it's worthwhile to use those and see. And then if there is a problem, to adjust. It does give me a lot of comfort that it doesn't that even if there was a slight backup, that it wouldn't back up directly onto 125. That was one of the concerns about the Starbucks over by the Bertucci's, is that there wasn't as much space if there was a backup that it would go right and block the street. This is more internal, so I think, and with people coming from internally, I think those are a lot of benefits. So, yeah, I think I'm in favor of this as a modification, but I would like in a decision that there to be some checks and balances where we could check it out, and if a problem does arise, that we could take action.
And remember, I don't remember it specifically, but there is a condition that Princeton Property put bond money up to support that when Fajetta Development completes their commercial development, a traffic study is expected within a year of the final CO, I think. Already conditioned, we could do this on top of that, but.
I agree with both of you, so I'm not going to kind of echo that. Just one comment, though, just look, because one of the things that came up before was we all kind of questioned the length of the queue. And I see, in the response talking about using two sources of data from 2012 and 2009, and it's not saying it's the best data, it's just saying it's in the absence of anything else using that. So I think we've got to at least recognize that it's 10 years old, plus the data that we're using to determine how long people are going to be waiting for Starbucks. So I think it's probably pretty unrealistic. And I think just, anecdotally going by any Starbucks and counting the people, in the local ones, it's a lot more than that. Waited in the line, right? I think a lot of us probably have. So 13, it's not reasonable. That being said, I don't think it's going to back up onto 125, but I think we need to have something to cover, what if it's more like the other Starbucks in the area where it's a lot more than 13 people in line.
Okay, I agree. And a lot's going to be determined by when it goes in and what the conditions are. Are we still in our COVID times? And are people, is this drawing more people there, or is it the same people that would have been going to Dunks or Bird and Wolf? And there's a lot of unknowns. So I think we need to just put in enough in a decision that allows us to make changes kind of on the fly as needed.
And I'm surprised there just was no counts of the Starbucks in the area, right? Rather than 10-year-old data. That's a little disappointing that there's not better data out there that someone can say, hey, this is reality, not what people are planning for, not what other Starbucks have been built for or planned for. Okay, what's reality? Rather than a 10-year-old study or a plus study, but it is what it is.
And if I can just piggyback off what Kelly was saying, because if I remember correctly, and maybe I'm not remembering this correctly, when we discussed this last, I thought that was one of the issues that was going to be looked into is the volume of traffic that's going through the localized Starbucks. I thought that information was going to be obtained.
We did ask about that. Do we have any info from the applicant about that? Did we ever get anything on that?
I can address that. Scott Thornton with Vanessa Associates. I think the way we had looked at it was that Gene was going to check the file for the earlier Starbucks application that had been previously approved in town, which was on a much busier street, and I think there was. And it was really a timing issue because we didn't think that we could get data from an existing Starbucks in time to get that information incorporated. So we thought that if there was existing data that had already been collected for the other Starbucks, we would use that. But I don't believe that other Starbucks had collected that information. So because they didn't have it, we didn't go out and collect that data. Now I think that to some extent there's the fact that it's 10-year-old data is a bit of an issue, but at the same time the problem that we have with collecting data now is that it's a different condition, and the pandemic has changed a lot of the operating characteristics of these sites. So, we could be, if we did collect data for a period now, we could be overestimating or building for a queue condition that, when things equilibrate and balance out, go back to normal, then there's a queue that a storage lane that never gets used. We would prefer to, as you had indicated, I believe as part of the state permit process, there's also a monitoring study that Gene had alluded to. We would prefer to develop the site as proposed and come back and do a monitoring study. Obviously, when the site opens, there'll be conditions in place to make sure that queues don't exceed the available storage. And 6 months after occupancy, 12 months after occupancy, whatever the time frame is, we can come back and do follow-up studies to identify what the queuing conditions are. I think with some of the other measures that are proposed to sort of draw off the drive-through operation, for the handhelds in particular, with the iPads where they can collect orders from motorists when they're en route or first pull into the site, or curbside service where the where the orders can be brought out to the customer. I think there's a greater opportunity to have those kinds of peeling off of the drive-through trips occur. So I think that's sort of a thumbnail sketch of that issue.
So yeah, I mean, I agree with Alyssa. I would have liked to have that information. I think it would have definitely been helpful. To your point, Scott, I think it wouldn't have helped Starbucks, but I mean, you said when things go back to normal. I think it's more of a if things go back to normal. I mean, things are gonna be different than they were 2 years ago. Regardless, there are gonna be more people working at home, even if and when this pandemic is over. So it's gonna be different. But to the extent that things will back up, if it's internal, I mean, it seems to me that we put the risk on the applicant, and we really bake it into the permit that if there is a problem, then you have to fix it. You have to put up bond money to fix it, or you have to fix it, or we're going to pull your permit and say you can't operate unless there's less than 15 car queuing or whatever. Unless I think where I'm more comfortable doing that in a situation like this than in the Bertucci's one where it was going to back up onto the roads. So
Yeah,
that's my thought.
I
Just
agree
make
with
it
that.
harsh penalty if you don't do it right.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. This puts the onus on the property manager to
Right.
make sure that the issue is addressed, and you don't have that condition where the queue could extend out onto 125. I mean, it would have to go quite a long ways, and we don't foresee anything like that happening.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? Or Gene, is there any additional resident comment?
There is not.
Okay, what are the next steps, Gene?
So if the board's supportive, I can draft a decision for the next meeting.
So why don't you draft a decision, but I'd really like to, like I said, like John kind of suggested, either the monitoring program or something along with their other, those can overlap, but they don't have to. But I want, one, some way to test it, and two, a way for us to enforce if things are not going the way they should be.
Yep.
And then we'll continue that until, continue the public hearing until our next meeting date, which is the 18th?
Yep.
Okay. Great, very good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
21 High Street, discussion item?
All right, so apologize, I didn't include this in my staff report. Things were flying in this week. So 21 High Street is an approved project for a 51-unit multifamily residential development. It was permitted in January of 2018. It was then brought under a master development plan for Subdistrict A in March of 2020. Essentially, RCG owns the property. They had done a subdivision to divide their property into 3 lots. The proposed 51-unit residential building was proposed on Lot 2. Avalon Bay has actually purchased Lot 2 and intends to carry out this project. However, they have submitted a request for an insubstantial change. That change is detailed in their letter, primarily some facade changes that they've already gone to the Machine Shop Village for and received a certificate to alter. The other changes are 1 parking lot improvement as well as some interior changes and a slight unit mix. And so on the call tonight, we have Francis Yoon, who is here from Avalon Bay, that is going to describe the request for insubstantial change. I have prepared a draft decision if the board is willing to entertain that tonight after you hear all this evidence. But I think I'll turn it over to Francis at this point.
Thanks, Jane. And thanks, members of the board, for your time this evening. Again, my name is Francis Ewan, and I'm a development director at Avalon Bay. I'm joined today by Ed Bradford of the architectural team and Phil Henry of Civil Design Group. As was mentioned by Jane in the memo, Avalon Bay recently acquired the multifamily development site at 21 High Street, also known as Lot 2 of the East Mill, from RCG. We're before you this evening to respectfully request an insubstantial change to the Subdistrict A special permit that was granted to RCG to develop the site. So when Avalon Bay purchased the site, we did an evaluation of the existing plans. And after that evaluation, we were hoping to incorporate some minor modifications to adjust the unit mix, the building facade, and some improvements to the parking lot, adjustments that we believe better align with Avalon specifications, are more consistent with the 170-unit community that we're building across the street at the West Mill, and that also better respond to the current market demand. As Gene also had mentioned, these modifications have been presented to and were approved by the Machine Shop Village Neighborhood Conservation District Commission, and the project was granted a certificate to alter this past December. With that, I'm going to turn it to Phil Henry of Civil Design Group to discuss some specific changes that we're hoping to incorporate to the parking area.
Thanks, Francis. Can everybody hear me? Good evening. So the changes are very minor in nature. The building is not proposed to change, nor are the supporting spaces leading up to the building. What is proposed to change is a pedestrian access way from the parking area up above near the garage, leading to building 2, the proposed building 2. Yeah, Gene, if you can go to the site plan. Yep. If I could direct you to the screen, what's highlighted in red are the changes. As I had mentioned, there's a sidewalk connection between the 2 lots, and then an ADA ramp that is also connecting for between the upper lot and the lower lot. We also removed the exterior refuse area, and in turn added 1 parking space due to the relocation and loss of that area. Other than that, the utilities were the other minor change. The prior development under RCG included electric from the overhead lines that are traversing through the property. The electrical service line is now proposed to connect onto High Street. That's really the highlights of that change. Like I said, the building hasn't changed, the footprint hasn't changed, the location hasn't changed. It's really some minor changes. And that's pretty much highlights all the site changes. I'll turn it over to Ed to highlight some of the building facade changes.
Yes, hello. Good evening, folks. Ed Bradford, principal with TAT. Happy to be before you again. And I just have 5 slides for you this evening just to walk you through the adjustments that we're proposing. All of the slides are set up in the same format where we're juxtaposing our proposed, in this case on this slide that Gene has up, proposed floor plan, in this case shown on the top juxtaposed with the approved floor plan special permit approval in the bottom. And just to first kind of dive in, if you will, to the kind of big picture, as Phil noted, the changes are really quite minor when you think about the larger sort of primary dimensional program and features. So, Gene, I just want to focus on the chart in the lower right-hand corner there, just to highlight some of those key elements. So, what we have in this chart is the dimensional features on the left. The middle column shows the approved dimensions, and then the column on the right shows what we're proposing. So, as Phil noted, the building footprint area is unchanged, 14,860 feet. In the approved, we're not proposing change to that. This is a 4-story building, so you stack that footprint 4 times, 59,440 square feet. No change to the total floor area. As was noted, the total number of units is also unchanged. 51 units is proposed. There is, as Francis noted, a minor adjustment to the unit mix. But you can see in the summary, the total bedrooms actually are decreased by 4, and the total number of 3-bedroom units are similarly decreased by 4. So some adjustment to the unit mix, but overall fewer bedrooms, if you will. Similarly, we are proposing a minor adjustment to the building height. We're just under 2 feet increase in building height, and that's really because of a adjustment in the structural system, comparing our proposed design to the approved design, and to ensure 9-foot ceiling heights. We're proposing a modest increase in the building height from 45.7 feet to 47.6 inches. But again, a modest adjustment and well below the 55 feet that is permitted by the zoning bylaw for this zone. So to just switch a bit to the same exhibit to show you the, if you wouldn't mind staying with the first floor, Gene. Yep, thank you. To focus just on the floor plan changes, I think as you can see, again, the bottom floor plan being the approved design, the top floor plan being our proposed design. Then you can see the basic configuration within this footprint that's unchanged is also quite similar. The changes are really entirely focused within this footprint and having to do with adjustments to the unit layouts to conform to Avalon Bay's standards for, you name the dimensional criteria for a unit, but Avalon Bay has pretty impressive, frankly, guidelines for kitchen, bedroom, bathroom dimensions, layouts. So it's simply a matter of going within this box and adjusting the units to comply with the Avalon standards. That's really the focus of the change. So as you can see, the main entrance to the building is sort of off to the west there, is unchanged. The quantity of common space shown in the pink color is reduced slightly, but again, configured in the same location associated with the main entry. Egress stairs on left and right are the same. This building dimension, as you may recall, is a very narrow building. I'll switch to the second floor in a moment, but you'll see it's a single loaded configuration with the corridor, single loaded corridor configuration, with the corridor located on the parking lot side and the units located to the pond side. So pretty what we think will be a wonderful arrangement for the units and the residents. So that is also unchanged. So if we just flip to the next exhibit, please, Gene. This shows, again, a comparison of the typical floor. This shows the second, third, and fourth floor, which are essentially the same. Again, the plan on the bottom is the special permit design, and on the top is our proposed revisions. And again, you can see same footprint, and then the adjustments are within are really associated with the units. So again, single loaded corridor is located on the parking side, units to the pond side. One change that you can see here that I should note is the approved design did locate mechanical units along the corridor. So you can see those white boxes that are that are along the exterior wall. Those are condensing units and grills, and I'll show you in the elevation the change that's associated with that. But we're proposing to shift those mechanical units to the roof, primarily condensing units. So that frees up and creates what we think is an improvement and quite an opportunity along the corridor. So you can see on our proposed design, those mechanical closets are removed. The corridor is kind of cleaner. There's more opportunity for windows. And that mechanical equipment is moved to the roof. And we'll show you that we are also proposing a equipment screen to ensure that's not visible from ground level. We can shift to the next exhibit, please. The next three exhibits focus on the elevation changes. Again, configured in the same way. The bottom elevation being the special permit approved design, and on the top, our proposed adjustment. And as Francis noted, we did, we're grateful for the time that the Machine Shop Village Commission provided for us over a meeting in November and then even a couple in December to work through these adjustments to make sure it was in keeping with the approval and in keeping, of course, with the historic character of the district. So, but I think you can see pretty minor changes. We were focused on a lot of details with the commission, but big picture, pretty minor changes, and they do relate primarily to the plan change that I just identified. And you can see on the bottom elevation, the grills that were associated with that interior mechanical equipment, the condensing units. Again, we're proposing to move those to the roof, screen that equipment from view, but that results in a much more regular pattern of windows that the Machine Shop Village Commission believed and agreed with us that is a pattern of windows really more in keeping with the district, so an improvement in the design overall. If you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, please, Jean. So now we've shifted to the opposite elevation. This is the elevation facing the pond. So again, same configuration. Bottom row is the special permit approval. Top is our proposed minor adjustments. And here I think the adjustments are even more minor in nature and resulting really from a change related to a balcony, or what's called a Juliet balcony, that was proposed in the approved design. That is not something that we're incorporating into our proposed design. So we worked with the Machine Shop Village to come up with an organization of the windows that had the same sort of dimension width-wise as the opening in the approved design. But then really we focused on, again, creating really quite a regular rhythm of windows, because that's just what you find in the adjacent mills. And then the final slide, please. So this focuses, we did spend a fair amount of time with the commission, Machine Shop Village Commission, focused on the main entry. This is my final slide, and it shows on the left-hand side the approved design, the elevation in the bottom left, the associated floor plan above, and then the same on the right, our proposed design. And really, again, just like the other facade changes, this one is entirely related to the floor plan adjustment. So you can see on the right, while again the footprint is unchanged, we were able to shift that elevator in away from the exterior wall. And what that creates is an opportunity to get a sort of bank of windows and a lot of light into that elevator lobby. And we think, again, an improvement to the entry elevation. So we did, again, sort through this with Machine Shop Village Commission. We have incorporated a very similar entry canopy, a similar banner sign, features that were in the approved design. So we're pleased with the adjustments. That concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, Francis, is there anything else you guys want to present before we discuss?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Questions, comments?
I guess from my perspective, I think the design is an improvement, and I really like the process with the historical group, because I think to some degree those types of issues are better addressed by a group like that that's focused on that issue exclusively. And so I think the outcome is very good. And I guess the one flag that I had was answered is that if mechanicals on the roof, they need to be screened. So I think this is great. I think it's an improvement and, very well done.
Great. Kelly?
Just one follow-up question on the screening for the mechanicals on the roof. I noticed that the language said it was screened from ground level views. Is that meant to exclude that they can be seen from any abutters from different levels, or is it just?
No, it'll be entirely screened from
Entirely screened,
rather than from the grade. Yeah.
Okay.
As I recall, this is pretty far back from the road, right?
Yes.
I think so. Okay. I just want to make sure that it wasn't excluding that abutters could see it out of their windows. Okay. Great. Thank you. And then just one question. I noticed the unit change mix. Like you said, keeping the number of bedrooms, reducing the number of bedrooms, keeping the same number of units. Are any of those, could you refresh, are any of them affordable units?
No. They're all market rate units.
All market rate. Okay. That's easy. Tom.
Okay. Melissa? Anything else?
No, I don't have anything else to add.
Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Eitan. Is there any notification of abutters of these changes?
Not if we deem it an insubstantial change. At least not on our end. I don't know about the Machine Shop Village. I don't think so. But if we deem it an insubstantial change, then it wouldn't need to go through the modification process, and there wouldn't be any notification.
Yeah, I don't obviously disagree with that. I'm just thinking that oftentimes communication is really important, and if not communicated, it can create perceptions that could be addressed easily with a communication. So maybe if we're not able to do that notification, maybe the applicant would like to do that. What are your thoughts about that, Eitan?
I think we can recommend it. I think it could certainly be recommended. Question before us today would be whether it's insubstantial change.
Right.
It seems like it is. I mean, the unit count was the one thing that that I had some concern about, but where it's going down, especially the 3-bedroom going down, to me that is, that would be insubstantial. The parking, again, insubstantial, and I agree with John. The fact that the facade changes were all made in conjunction with the Machine Shop Village is what gives me clarity and relief that this is done right. And so I agree that I think this is better. It's less intrusive. It's I don't think any notification is needed, but I agree with Peter. I think it would be nice maybe to send a little letter just saying, hey, this project has been kind of sitting for a while. So, hey, we're going to start, this might be a good time to say, hey, this is when our construction phases are going to be, this is who to reach out to with questions. And just so you know, we did change it a little bit, made it a few less units, and made these following changes. If you have any questions, here's a place to see. That just might be a nice thing for the neighbors, especially on Water Street, because I remember when we did originally go out and do this 4 years ago, there were especially some questions from the people on Water Street about, how it was all going to look and things like that.
Machine Shop Village does have a noticing requirement. I think it's for direct abutters as opposed to the 300-foot requirement for a special permit, but I'm pretty certain it's direct abutters.
Okay, so that's something that we would recommend. I mean, obviously you guys Avalon seems to like doing business in town as you guys came back for another round, so good neighborly thing to do would just be to notify, abutters within 300 feet of just what's coming and when it's coming. It'd be a nice thing to do. Okay, so why don't we take a vote as to insubstantial change? So vote on whether we agree that this is an insubstantial change. I'll start with John.
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
Alyssa,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so approved as an insubstantial change. So your request is allowed. Jean, is there a second request?
No, just the insubstantial change. Do you want to entertain a draft decision?
Yes.
All right, so it's shown here on the board. And the packet did include a deed, which was evidence that Avalon Bay has purchased this lot, in case anyone has concern. This is in the agenda link, if you're more comfortable reading it through that link.
What's it
So
titled?
It's titled 220104 Draft Decision Insubstantial Change AB.
Okay, got it. Let's review that. Now, one of the things, Gene, in the history is that we approved an insubstantial change in order to eliminate a section of the right-of-way easement located on the East Mill parcel from the zoning calculations.
Yep.
I assume that that's not affected by this request and
No.
any of the changes?
Nope.
Okay. And this is just residential, right? Not mixed use?
That's correct. Just residential.
Okay. Anyone have questions or comments on the draft decision? Good to me. Get a motion to approve the notice of decision insubstantial change for
I'll
Avalon Bay
make that
Community.
motion.
Motion made by John. Can we get a second?
I second.
Seconded by Alyssa. All right, John,
All right,
Alyssa,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Peter,
Aye.
and I vote yes. That is approved. Thank you, Jean, for that. I'll work on that.
Okay.
Now, we have a request for a permit extension as well.
Well, a determination whether a permit extension or whether the permit is still effective due to tolling from COVID-19, I guess is the request being made. And, I mean, I can suggest,
I'll say I'd rather extend the permit just if there's any issues. I don't think
Yeah.
it's up to us to decide whether something's tolled or not. I don't think we have the right expertise, and even if we decided it one way or the other, if someone disagreed, then our decision doesn't really mean anything. So why don't we, when's the permit due to expire?
so the permit's due to expire March 10th of 2022, and I agree with you, Eitan. I mean, essentially, it comes down to the building commissioner's determination when a building permit is applied for, whether it's still in existence, that the permit's still effective. And so, as far as this board, they have the authority to extend a special permit up to a year from the time of expiration due to certain causes, if substantial use or construction hasn't commenced. And so the request in this memo is for an extension of the special permit to June 15th, 2023. I would suggest if you're going to entertain an extension, it would be to March 20th, 2023.
Okay, so we'll extend it, and I mean, that's obviously subject to any tolling that has taken place or will take place, but, so if we get a motion to extend the expiration date of the special permit until March 20th, 2023.
So moved.
Motion made by John. You got a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kelly. All right, all in favor. John?
Aye.
Kelly?
Yes.
Alyssa?
Yes.
Peter?
Aye.
And I vote yes. Okay, so that's approved. If you need more time, come back to us before that time period lapses.
Hopefully you don't need more time, because that's the maximum the bylaw allows for, so you'd have to be starting over, so let's get construction going.
Start building.
We appreciate it. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Thank you very much. All right, Gene, what else we got?
Okay, so we have the water demand evaluation. We have Tara from Western Sampson on the call. So the evaluation was included in your comment. There was a detailed report. However, Tara has provided late today a presentation in PowerPoint format that I am trying to bring up right now.
Okay.
All right, so hopefully this may simplify some of the information. However, Tara is certainly here to answer any questions the board may have. Tara? It's a long wait. Hopefully Tara's still here.
No, it looks like
Oh, there you go.
she's
Okay.
muted. We can't hear.
We can't hear you, but she's not, I don't see her as muted, but
Yeah,
maybe check
sure.
your microphone.
Yep, there you go. Turn your volume up, Tara.
Jean, want to tell us a little bit about the process and what got us here while she's trying to get audio?
Sure. You may recall that there was considerable concern about the cumulative effect of recent development in the town and the capacity of Lake Echegwick, our sole drinking water supply. And so the town manager agreed to hire a consultant to do an evaluation of water demand that takes into consideration current usage as well as projected, again, permitted projects that are not yet constructed, such as Avalon Bay, the Midco project, which is 136 units, the 51-unit project that you discussed tonight, as well as the commercial developments that have been permitted, such as, again, the Starbucks that you talked about tonight. The majority of that plaza is not yet constructed and using water. The 90,000 square foot storage facility that you recently permitted, the redevelopment of the Ethan Allen lot. So all that was taken into consideration, and water demand projections were projected out until, if I remember correctly, 2032 or 33. And so the measure of what we're allowed to pull from the lake versus what we currently are pulling was what the evaluation was. And DEP monitors, like we provide an annual report to DEP showing statistics of the water demand. And we have a permit, if I putting this in the simplest terms, but we have a permit for what we can draw from the lake. and we have not met or exceeded that permit. And did not forecast to do so until that time of 20,032 and 3.
Tara? Nope.
So we can carry the presentation to the next meeting if you'd like, Eitan? If we can
Yeah.
work this out.
Why don't we try to do it again at the next meeting? But just I'd like to hear just kind of if there are any people have any thoughts or questions that maybe can come back to. I mean, one thing that I saw that was interesting was that there was a note about a certain property and the lake, depending on what happened with that property, the lake could go up a foot. I thought that was really interesting and something would be worth exploring and talking about. And then we had previously had some discussions about, other items getting into the lake and things like that, and or where water's lost. I thought that was interesting as well. So those were just some initial thoughts, and then just I couldn't get a great sense of the overall conclusion. So those are some things I'd like to hear about when we actually are up and running.
There were actually two sort of big questions that I had related to it. I believe that the average daily yield permit is for 4.4 million or whatever it was. I forget exactly what it was, but somewhere in that ballpark. But when you look at the data by month over the course of the year, it peaks at a higher level than that during the summer. So my question really revolves around the peak load, is that if at certain times of the year the peak is much higher, how high can it go, and could you reach a restraint on that? Because I was a little bit surprised, is if you look at just the average across the year, you could have problems if you don't look at the peaks and valleys. The other question I had is sort of the supply side of it, is what happens if we have a drought situation? Does that lower the supply to a lower level than what we've got, especially during the summertime? If the demand goes up to water and the supply goes down, might you not have a problem? And I guess that was the one thing it didn't seem to answer that, at least based on my reading of it.
So I'm not sure can you guys all hear me now that I'm on the cell phone?
So hold on there. So we can hear you, but you need to mute your computer so that we don't have the feedback.
I'm just going to leave that meeting.
Okay, we can hear you.
Okay. So the discussion really, I guess the first question that I heard was the 4.4 is the Water Management Act permitted withdrawal. And that is that's a running annual average. So, daily average. So the historic numbers that were provided in the report, it seems pretty clear that there is the capacity there. The question, I guess, is during the peaks and valleys and the drought scenario, there is a 2016 specific information provided during the full year that you can kind of compare the drought against the actual usage. And that's actually, and I can refer to at least everybody in the report if they'd like to see kind of that more data and understanding of that. That kind of falls under the, page specific to 2016 is on page 4, the bottom graph. You can kind of see we wanted to chart the rainfall as well. So you could just see the drought consideration. Obviously, during the summer months, you're going to have a larger, increase of water withdrawal.
Right. I guess my question is a little bit of a conceptual one, not exactly the numbers, but is there, if we have a permit for 4.4 and that's an average, what is the peak that we could draw before we run into a problem? Because I think what we're trying to feel is how close we are to our capacity limits. And
right.
So really, it was kind of like, okay, if the demand goes up during the summer, how high can it go? And if the supply drops, how low could it go? At what point do we have a problem? That's really what I was trying to figure out conceptually.
Yeah, and there's two things with that. I mean, there is a water quality concern, certainly, and in discussions with the with the water department, there hasn't been any concerns when we've hit those peak daily dates or months, if you will. In 2016 and 2020 are kind of the big peak date years that we've had a lot more withdrawal. And there hasn't been any concerns on that level, and there has been plenty of water. So, the question really is, what can you allow? And most things, certainly if under maximum demand scenarios, you've got some concerns. I think the point of this study was to kind of take a look at your projected plan and development, and it really looks like it's less than 4% of an increase, and that 4% is pretty minor compared to what you're actually withdrawing, even during a drought and also during the COVID semi-drought conditions that we've seen this past year.
Okay, thank you.
And, okay, why don't we just go around? Well, can you tell me, so there was a note in the report about a way to raise the water level by a foot. Can you, what is that? What was that all about?
So there was discussion with the DPW that there is one structure that's located basically in the lake. Their property is abutting the lake, but there's actually the structure itself. The water level is kept lower on purpose so that it's not inundated that land area and the building and the structure that's over there. So there was some discussion that it's 400 Great Pond Road, and DPW had mentioned that there could be a study and a review of whether or not, if we increase the height of the lake, number one, is it feasible, and that would more or less have to relate to removal or relocation of those existing structures that are at that property. But really how that could benefit, there is some other concerns, when you do raise the level of the lake, what else is impacted, and certainly there might need to be another more fundamental review of the dam itself that's impounding the lake. But the real concern was whether or not that's a property that for watershed protection would be beneficial to purchase and or adjust the location of the structures to allow for a potential increase. And when you raise a foot, that's a significant amount of water in that area, and that would be a modification to the impoundment area as well as the yield for the reservoir itself, and potential increase in your withdrawal. That would all be permitting, of course, but it was just a thought that something that would certainly require a lot more engineering review.
Did you look at, and you said, I know you looked at different usages over different times, about whether or not we had any, in North Andover, there were any water restrictions during those time periods. I don't remember any recently, but I know other towns have had restrictions on watering and when lawns could be watered, times, dates, numbers of, odd, even days, things like that. I know we haven't had any of that recently. I'm not sure when the last time was, to be honest, but was that looked at as part of the study?
So that is kind of one of the bullet items of just reviewing the actual bylaws and policies of when a water use restriction could be implemented. There are many ways to conserve water, and I'm certainly a proponent of conservation of water and protecting watersheds. And so in that case, the thought would be, if you want to, reduce, and it's predominantly what we can see right now is residential usage, certainly during COVID was a much higher situation of usage during the summer months. Everybody's home and they're looking at their green lawns and they want them greener. So that's one of the cases of just possibly, whether or not be mandatory or voluntary, discussing methods. And DEP does restrict watersheds based on drought conditions. It just so happens that it hasn't been for a few years in your area.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Peter, Kelly, Alyssa?
Just looking at the demand, the breakdown of customer usage by type and the demand on the water, it's showing just some big drops around. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the data. For industrial, for example, it was using, in 2018, 93 MGY, but in 2019, it drops to 28. So it just seems like a big drop there. Do we know why we were seeing those big changes? I mean, that's down, so it's good, but going to come right back up?
So that's one of our concerns is we were not able to individualize accounts, and that's something that we would further do down the road. We took more or less the basic data sets and in the annual statistic reports provided to Mass DEP. It is certainly an anomaly that's interesting. It's very possible that there could be a specific industrial usage that went offline during those years and went back on, or what the usage are. I think the key that we were looking at was the majority of your water usage is by residential, and there was a significant increase during drought years and during COVID. And that's something that you have a little bit more control over, as far as it's likely predominantly related to usage for lawn irrigation.
Can I follow up on that, Kelly, before you? So if it's residential, do we have any basic statistics about, or from here or from elsewhere, about when it's a residential use, how much of that is irrigation versus pools versus use for toilets and showers and stuff like that?
So you'd really look at your winter usage, or possibly before the pool season, if you will, and try to look at more of a March, April usage, and say like a October usage versus a June, July, and August usage. That is one of the issues that we did highlight in the report, that a little bit additional information needs to be gleaned out of the billing software, and we need to work with the water department on how to use that to a little bit more effectively. It may require special software to be added on to get that data a little bit more granular. So we basically have monthly data, and it's clear that you can trend, from the pumped usage out of the lake, that it's clearly more of an irrigation period of time. But certainly with COVID, it's just you have more people living at home. They're there 24/7. They're not traveling to office buildings and whatnot, and certainly using water throughout their normal day. So an annual usage of a shower, say it's 10 gallons or so, 15 gallons, depending on if you have a water energy saver fixture. But in the long run, your lawn irrigation systems are typically your big water hogs, and filling a swimming pool, typically you fill it once the season, and then you obviously add to it as evaporation occurs. But there's certainly rainwater occasionally that also fills it too. So, your larger pools are certainly a different story, but the lawns and the land per capita is a larger portion of what you're seeing in North Andover compared to like a city where you've got a much smaller acreage of land and typically no irrigation built in.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
So we do have separate meter types, though, right? Do we have one residential where you're paying both water and sewage, and then we have ones that are typically used for irrigation where you're only paying for water and not the sewage fee? Are you just saying that that's where?
So there are deduct meters or for sewage, that obviously for not going into the sewer. There are some properties that have that. In this case, you're still being billed for the actual water usage because you're using it, whether it go down the drain into the sewer or used on your lawn. You're just getting a discount for what's not actually being treated by the sewer system.
Yeah, I would just think that might, Etan, to answer your question, that might help us figure out how much is being used for irrigation and watering lawns and pools versus what's used for flushing toilets.
And that's pulling out of the information of some people have the deduct meters, and then on top of it, some you have to do individual account analysis, which it seems very difficult for the water department to pull that data.
All right, so thank you. So just the other questions, that was on kind of the demand side. Then on the supply side, I noticed you talked, some of the report showed that rainfall changes over year. What kind of predictions do you try to use in terms of kind of future supply of rainwater? Does that apply here as we think just about potential for change in the amount of water that we do get and what our supply is? Is that something that is considered, or just out of realm of this?
There are certainly predictive models that we can project for rainfall and water predictive usage. So Weston Sampson has capabilities. It's an option for the future if that's something that either the planning board or the DPW wants to work together on.
Okay, but wasn't considered here, wasn't a part of this study. Okay.
We just took straight data at this point. It's more considered an initial study, and then the recommendations at the end. And I believe that is one of the recommendations of, if you want to forecast further, that's more of, taking the data and taking it the next step. This is more of an initial quick, here's all of our data, let's get it all compiled into one report so we can at least start to talk about the potential issues, if there are any, and methods for mitigation if need be.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it seems like that's the missing piece, right? We talk about supply, the supply and demand for the water to know where we stand.
Right. I mean, your watershed protection, management plan is more of a, protection of the water supply and water quality, and this is more of a review of, okay, what are your current usage demands? What are your future demands? What are your population? What are you looking at for population growth and potential development? And are you seeing a correlation that meets or exceeds what your permanent withdrawal rate is? And at this point, we're not seeing that, but I think that, the next steps would be kind of taking it one step further and analyzing, okay, in a case of an extreme drought and worst case scenarios, what happens? And certainly that's kind of a next step review. But I think there's some other steps that can be taken certainly in advance, like we talked about just making people more aware a little bit of irrigation usage and, staggering timing of that. And some people are unaware of how much their water, bill could be, or if they just used a little bit less water for irrigation each day.
One last question, I promise. So on the key takeaway slide in the presentation, the first bullet says the town's annual average withdrawals below the WMA permitted limit and projected to stay below that limit for the next 15 years. Is that because the study only looks out 15 years, or because we have a problem at year 16?
It was only through 2035.
Okay, that's as far as you looked. It wasn't.
Or 2034, I guess technically, but that's really the water management permit and where you're looking for a 20-year permit renewal, and technically, although the timing of it, it's coming up in the next year or so that there will be a renewal for the permit. I think 2014 was technically when DEP issued renewals, and unfortunately, this with a lot of different factors and situations that the renewal process has been delayed for all basins across the state. So when you get your renewal, it'll be only good for about 14 years once that process actually happens.
Thank you.
Sure.
Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Eitan, and thanks, Tara, for doing this. I guess I have two areas of comment. The first is kind of a formatting thing, but it concerns me. The Royal Crest proposed development is noted in 3 places, Table 2 and Table 3 in the report, and Slide 11 on the PowerPoint. And in all of those locations, it's referred to as a known future development. Royal Crest is a proposal. It is not a known development. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eitan, but we have not approved it. It may not occur. And my concern is that there was quite a bit of discussion about this study, and I suspect and hope that it will get looked at by a number of folks in the town. And this should not be portraying Royal Crest development as an approved or known development. At the very least, it should be asterisked and noted that it is proposed.
We can make that.
But you agree that it should be part of the study, right?
Of course, because it is part of an estimated future demand, but not because it's a known development, because it is a potential future development.
Okay, so.
And then I had one other item that I wanted to note.
Yeah, hold on.
Tara, did you follow
hold on.
that
Can
comment?
I just want to go to
Yeah,
your
no,
chart.
I totally understand where you're, yeah.
Let's
It's,
just go
table,
to, let's just.
Table 2.
So there it says planned resident. So I guess.
Correct, and it is not planned. Royal Crest should have an asterisk noting proposed. And again on Table 3, which is on page, I don't see the page, page 11.
So maybe the table should say planned and proposed residential
In
commercial development.
whatever way makes it clear that we are not endorsing Royal Crest as a known planned development. It is still on proposed status. And then again on slide 11 in the PowerPoint.
I guess I'll ask the board if proposed versus planned is the preferred wording, or I just don't know where the status is of all these other
Right.
sites that are listed.
That's fine. That's not on you to know them. Okay. So, Gene, can you work with them on just change? I mean, I think that's a fair distinction. At least
the
putting
only
an
reason
asterisk that's a proposed development.
Yeah, the only reason I'm raising this is I don't want this misinterpreted that we have approved that proposed development.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Great.
And
then
yeah, go ahead.
My second point, the conclusions and recommendations, beginning on page 11 and continuing to page 13, there's roughly 16 of those conclusions and recommendations. And I was somewhat struck that about half of them relate in some way to steps that could or should be taken to conserve water. I think that's always a good practice. There's a lot of reasons for that, sustainability and resilience and many other reasons. But I wanted to ask you, is that because you are emphasizing significantly in my mind that this is a good practice, or is that because the analysis here of future use will depend on improved conservation efforts?
So that's a two-part answer, and I think initially I 100% agree with you. It's always a good focus area to conserve. You have a sole source. Lake Chickawatt is the primary and only source, I should say, for the town. So you always want to make sure that you're conserving it as you can. And the second fold is if you did choose to request an increase in your withdrawal rate from the lake, DEP will require you to implement more conservation measures and make sure that other standards as far as BMP's best management practices are incorporated in all, planning and development, future build out. So there's a lot that's all tied towards this, and certainly the state is attempting to make larger strides in not just using less water, but okay, how can we also recharge the watershed in the process? And as far as infiltration and II work and reducing water coming out of the ground and going into your sewer system and being treated that way. There's just tons of different things, stormwater best management practices and stuff like that. So I would say that it goes hand in hand, and it's something that many communities are looking at more so as they are required to by the state just to even use if they're over their permitted withdrawal, which some communities in the state are. They are required to follow the more stringent measures, and the new permit will likely have some in it too. So
I agree. It's a good practice for many reasons, as you have noted. But you're saying that the projected water use does not require these conservation measures, or are you saying that if you don't achieve these conservation measures, your projected water use does not work?
Based on the numbers that we have right here, it does not seem that there's a concern in the next 10 plus years of going over your permit withdrawal. Now, that doesn't mean that there's other factors that might not come into play. Your permit renewal may have some requirements that indicate, more stringent measures over the permit duration that you'll need to implement.
Sure.
I can't predict the future for that, but certainly some communities have seen, and others are just taking more of a stand on just improving and making sure that new development is following all the state standards. So
right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I actually do have one other comment. I want to congratulate you on the correct pronunciation of the name of our lake.
Oh,
You do have
certainly.
some colleagues at Western and Sampson who struggled with that pronunciation, including at a meeting with the Board of Selectmen. So congratulations.
It does help that I've been working in town for 15 to 20 years, so I'm very aware of the lake, and there are other lakes that sound similar. So
Yes,
I've got a couple of them.
But similar but different. So congratulations.
Correct. Thank you.
Alyssa.
I think that the other board members have asked some excellent questions that have added a lot of clarity to this. So I have nothing further to add.
I agree. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and I think this was a good thing to have done. I think to Peter's point, I mean, it seems to me that the study suggests that we're not in any danger, but that doesn't mean there aren't practices and questions that we should continue to ask and things that we should push for. And some of these things wouldn't be too difficult to implement, and it shouldn't take a crisis for us to push for those things if they're going to help us in the long run. So I think what I'd be interested in is kind of thinking about, okay, where do we go from here? How do we continue to make progress in conserving and in keeping our drinking water supply safe and abundant before we get to any crisis points, before we get to any droughts, before we get to any continued large changes in demographics of people staying home and things like that. If there are easy things that we can do, this is a great tool to start doing them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Eitan. It really is striking to me that really about half of all these recommendations in some way was referring to room for improvement with best practices related to water conservation. And I think your point is especially the case given that we have a single point of failure with respect to our water supply. It's a sole source. I mean, if you compare us to the town of Burlington, Burlington experienced both high sodium levels and also PFAs, and embarked on connecting to MWRA as a result. They have to do that now. And they've been very public and open about it, which is good. They've been transparent. That's a very expensive step, not just making the connection to MWRA, but paying at those rates forevermore. And I don't know that that's even possible for North Andover because of our geographic location. Now, this report, interestingly, also notes that, in fact, there are emergency connections. If I recall correctly, it was to the town of Lawrence and I think town of Andover water supplies. But according to this report, those emergency connections, which might give us some resilience, if I read this correctly, are not operational.
And they do need to be, they have not been implemented in years and would certainly need to be tested and checked, and potentially are not operational.
Okay, so Jean, what are some things we can, so I mean, the point of this was to get information, get data, which is great. We have some suggestions. Who does it best go to now so that it doesn't just get dropped on the floor? I mean, I think it's great for when we talk about these future developments and things like that we have this and we can go back to it and look at it and see what we've done and have this data. But some of these suggestions, who do we bring this to continue the discussion?
Well, I think who spearheaded it and oversaw the study was Jim Stanford and the DPW, who the water treatment plant reports to him. So
okay.
I know the draft was sent to the town manager. So I can, once we get the revised one, certainly circulate it to everyone, saying that this is the final product.
Okay. And I think it's something that we shouldn't, and I know Peter won't let us drop things off the radar, but I think it's something that we should come back to and at least, come back to maybe, in the summer or in the fall and say, hey, have any of these steps been taken or where do we stand, just so that we can know and just keep a track. I mean, we don't have the executive capacity to make some of these things happen, but we can at least keep it on the radar and ask the questions.
Well, Eitan, I think another option we have is, over the years that I've been on the planning board, and I don't even know how long that's been, maybe 6-8 years, it's dwarfed by the amount of time John has been on the board. It has been a practice for the director of DPW to regularly come before the planning board to update us on things that relate to our work, which has been absolutely terrific for that department to be supportive of our function. Things like streets and roads slated for updating, that kind of thing. And I would think that we could ask that the director of DPW come back to the board, and I think we would be a friendly audience, welcoming updates, and we could ask ahead of time so there's no surprises. That it would also be great to hear your comments about the water supply study and recommendations focused on conservation and other issues, and in that they relate to things we're doing and to a lot of input we get from our fellow residents. So I really think we should ask to get that update, which we've had in years past, on one of our meeting schedules. And I think it's every time that the director's been here that I've been on the board, it's been really helpful.
Okay, and I think, we can kind of put in writing kind of the things that we're looking to get information about, so that I agree that it's not a surprise, so that we know and that we can have a good discussion about it and just get educated about what's happening and things like that. Jean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's plan to do that at some point. I like that idea. Okay.
I have one resident comment, Eitan.
Okay, about?
So the question was raised by Tara, that if North Andover,
okay.
that if North Andover were to request an increase in our current permit when we renew, we'd be required to implement some conservation. Is this a question because there is some indication that North Andover needs an increase or should request an increase? And that's from Andrea O'Donnell.
So there's always the potential, and I think that that's something that needs to be evaluated. It's a long road to do an increase, but if down the road there's a significant plan development, for increasing the withdrawal or increasing the usage, I should say, there is a potential that you can do that. I think that's something that the DPW and the water department need to evaluate. This study just really looked at the actual demands. If you had more water, the next step is really taking a look at, okay, can the infrastructure support that? And that's where you start to get into improving water mains in the streets when you have larger developments go in and items like that. So, but anytime you go through a permit process, DEP will require you to follow all current and future permit requirements that they have. And the Water Management Act is pretty stringent on really taking a hard look at conservation. The good news is that, you're right now there's a lot of statistics that for the most part you're in compliance roughly with the 65 residential gallons per capita a day and the 10% unaccounted for water, which are the two big highlights. There are many communities out there that are significantly blowing that out of the water, and most communities right now during COVID are nowhere near on the residential gallons per capita day at 65, which I was not surprised to see in North Andover either, being above it for this year. But those are performance standards that DEP takes a look at, and certainly the big fundamental item that most water systems will implement would be a ban on water use during drought and or low flow conditions. So you have a lake management plan that indicates when certain drought levels hit. That's when things are implemented. That's another thing that could just be reviewed if need be. But for the most part, I don't foresee it right now. It's just as you go up for discussions at any community, you talk about what we want to do over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And you have one source, and that's the concern and question of, it's really based on the firm yield, and that's something that we did not review in key detail. That would need to be reviewed as well. So again, there could be a lot of engineering work that's involved with that, which you need to make the decision before you spend that money if you want to do it or not.
So, but just to be clear, so based on the data that you saw over the next 10 to 15 years, we wouldn't meet the current threshold, right? We're not going above. So, right?
No, there's no immediate need unless for instance, if for some reason, if this COVID trending continues to go upward, which, I can't predict the future, but that's something that we recommend is just continuing to evaluate, next year, what happens as people go back to work. We'd love to see what the 2021 data shows, the 2022 data. So, but in the long run, you're looking at a 4% growth as far as development and a 6% population, increase. What's projected, that those are not big numbers when you're looking at, having a significant difference between your current usage and your allowable withdrawal rate. So I don't foresee any concerns with that right now.
And to some of the other points you made, there are other things, if there were some sort of concerns about the capacity or the usage, there are other avenues that can be taken prior to asking for more withdrawal, such as some of the best practices, such as irrigation, reductions, or times where you can't use irrigation, things like that can be done before you. Like you said, there's a lot that you have to do before DEP will say, okay, you can take more water out.
Yeah, when you do your request, they basically phase approach it and give you, first 5 years you need to complete X work. Next 10 years, what do you need to do? So, but yeah, there's definitely some conservation measures that we would all want to take, to not stress or potentially, need to. Yeah, I don't feel there's a need to increase your withdrawal right now, but down the road, like if the town doubled in size, certainly that's a whole different story. But we're not talking about those kind of numbers.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you for the question, Andrea. Okay, Gina, anything else?
Not on this topic, just meeting minutes.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 21st, 2021?
So moved.
Motion made by John. Can we get a second?
Nope, that was Peter.
That was Peter.
Oh, Peter. Sorry. Thank you, Peter.
Seconded.
Second by Kelly. All right. Approval. John?
Yes.
Alyssa?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Peter?
Aye.
And I vote yes. Okay. Anything else for tonight, everyone? Nope. All right. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Peter.
Second.
Seconded by Alyssa. All right. John?
Yes.
Alyssa?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Peter?
Aye.
And I vote yes. Thank you, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Happy New Year.